I know this might be continuing on the conjugate question, but I'd love your thoughts on Dr. Seb Ablesworth Modern Conjugate V2, and then a link also, Long Live the Republic of Sikistan.
So first of all, it's Set. I actually don't know who that is though. I'm just reading the question, Set Aylesworth. So this obviously is not a reflection on that person. We make a point, of course, of not talk shitty about any coaches except for Joel Seidman. Everyone else, it's not fair to absolutely, you know, rag on any coach without talking to them in any context. Same with athletes, you know, as we know, we do really try and make sure that we're not down talking anyone. We're here to put stuff out on the internet, especially in light of the recent stuff we saw with Jeff Nippard. You know, when we're talking about that kind of stuff, again, it's training information, it's business for us, it's lifestyle for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, for a lot of you, it's hobbies. We all just need to, you know, remain calm, and that's why sometimes you get really aggressive comments and stuff. You're like, buddy, you need to calm down. I'm not talking about this comment though. Long live Republic of Sikistan. So the thoughts on the conjugate, the problem is, every time we talk about conjugate, someone moves the goalpost. So when I talk about conjugate, I'm either referring to something Louis Simmons said, maybe some of the videos you watch, some of the documentaries that they did in the gym, or in relation to the Iron Samurai, one of his books. So people are like, no, that's not conjugate, or that's not what you have to do. It's such a weird question to answer because people routinely move the goalposts forwards. When they're talking about conjugate, they always say, no, you don't have to do that. Nobody does that in conjugate anymore, or you don't have to do that. Why would you do that? I don't do that. I don't know what you do. I'll talk about this commenter again. I'm just saying it's a really recurring theme. Anytime we've talked about Westside or conjugate is, we'll see dynamic effort days, max effort days, or whatever. You'll see what Louis says about them. We'll see what some of the original stuff would have said, some of those articles on maybe Elite FDS or T Nation. Now you look at it, there's different people doing it. They're no longer Westside or conjugate. They're not what Louis is doing. So then we're talking about people-specific programming, which we don't really want to do. So when we talk about conjugate, it's always about those original statements. So just remember that when we were talking about it. There was a few comments last week people didn't necessarily agree with. They said, no, this is what I do at conjugate. I don't know, again, what you do. We don't know what you do in your training. I did have a quick look at this particular program, just literally 5 minutes beforehand. Didn't have time to look at it this week, unfortunately, to read the full ebook. He starts talking about periodization, conjugate periodization. From what I gathered from it, it seems like it's his own programming. And if he's making the specific changes it looked like from the first few pages, it looks like he's trying to eliminate some of the issues with conjugate, so it could be going the right direction. Again, I didn't get to read a lot of it, but I just wanted to talk more about the conjugate question in general, because, you know, anytime we do answer it, we get the, I do this in my training, and it's like, okay, I hope that works for you, that's fantastic. But when we talk about conjugate, we're just referring to comments by Louis Simmons originally.
For increasing the high bar back squat for weightlifting, do you favor any other type of squat variation like pause, tempo, etc.? No. So anytime we're moving away from the high bar back squat, we're taking something away from it. It's not that there's not value to be gained from using a tempo squat or value to be gained from the pause squats and doing those for a period of time. But in terms of using the high bar back squat as the main driver of strength for weightlifting or for sports performance, whether it be for field sport or other strength sports, we really don't want to use any variations, any derivatives, or start bastardizing that squat in any way. Now, with that being said, there's some super specific things we like to do with the high bar back squat, and this goes for both weightlifting and the other sports I mentioned. The first one of these is that we tend to have a mid-bar position. So the barbell is not riding up very high here on my traps. What I want to get that barbell pretty much on the widest part of my shoulders. The bony process at the back of your shoulder here is a good area to aim for. You want that barbell to be sitting all the way across the shoulders, laid up on top of the traps, and then a nice stacked wrist position underneath it. This will lead to a very, very good bar position. Also, it takes some of the leverage away from the bar, just allows you to lift slightly higher weights in the long term. The next thing we like to do then is focus on the actual mechanics of the high bar squat. So when we're getting into position, we don't like very narrow stances. We also don't like incredibly wide and toed out stances. What we want is we want the feet to be somewhere between hip and shoulder width apart, predominantly toes forward and knees moving forward throughout the entire squat. So as I sit down into the bottom, I want my knees to move forward all the way until I hit the bottom position. And then I want my knees to stay forward for as long as possible as I stand up out of the squat. Now, what this forces me to do is recruit as much quad muscle as I possibly can. It also stops me pushing back onto my heels and getting more posterior chain dominance as I stand up out of the hole. A lot of the time, when we get to those heavier weights on the high bar back squat, you'll see people hitting the bottom position and their knees immediately bounce back, getting that shin into a vertical shin angle. This really puts the load onto our ass, our back, and takes it away from the quads, which we're really trying to develop. Question for a friend who recently broke lots of bones on the road to recovery, once cleared by a doctor. Should he train his good arm, stroke leg individually, or should he wait until it's fully healed to train?
So obviously, again, once cleared by a doctor is the important part of this statement. So just make sure, obviously, that going to the gym in any fashion, the assumption here is that it won't make things a lot worse. So he's obviously in a position where he's allowed to train. But if he's allowed to train and go do exercise, then absolutely he should train the uninjured limbs. There's a phenomenon known in muscle physiology known as the contralateral effect or the bilateral transference, which basically means that the uninjured limb can be trained and relatively normal levels of muscle mass can be sustained from side to side. So for example, if he trains his left leg, his right leg will maintain more muscle mass than if he hadn't trained it, even though the right leg may be broken. It's a really interesting phenomenon. It makes a bit of sense, I suppose, in terms of being a person in the wild pre-civilization. You have no chance of surviving unless that limb is in some way back to capacity when you've recovered. So it makes sense that for however that evolution worked, that if you break your right leg, someone keeps you alive for however long it takes to recover, that if you're still mobile on the other leg, that then that right leg isn't at minus 20, you're close to zero, or you're much less of a deficit than you would have been if you hadn't been training that left leg. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. I assume it's an evolutionary based one where you would have been a lot worse off, or people who didn't have this trait died out very aggressively, because breaking limbs in prehistoric times was probably incredibly common, and if you weren't as close to fitness after that break recovered, then you were probably going to die much faster than people for some reason had this genetic mutation. So it is very, very interesting, but basically the answer is yes, definitely train the uninjured sides. It's very important, not only for the recovery of that limb, but obviously the psychological benefits and the physiological benefits to general health are really important, and he'll probably feel a lot better if he can do some kind of training, assuming he's the kind of person who likes training.
Which program on the app or the website will be best for somebody whose goal is to improve fitness? I don't play any sports or compete, just trying to be healthier and fitter while dropping weight, thanks. The main thing I'd recommend here is a combination of the off-season strength and hypertrophy program, which is written for basically athletes like soccer players, rugby players, football players who are in their off-season to gain as much strength and as much lean tissue mass as you possibly can. And with that, I will put in something like the track running program, or probably more likely the rowing erg program. So in those two programs, we have a combination of a really good, well-rounded strength and hypertrophy program. So we'll be pushing up those numbers all the time, continuing to hold on to what strength you have as you're losing weight, maybe even gaining a slight amount of strength depending on what phase you're joining that weight loss journey on. Also, gaining as much lean tissue mass as possible to help with that weight loss, while also gaining burning a massive amount of calories from those gym sessions. The second program then that goes along is obviously the row erg program. That just helps to burn a few more calories, just keep that calorie deficit going, make it a small bit easier. It might be a bit easier if we can take 100 or 200 calories extra throughout the day, if we're getting those extra 100 or 200 calories in on a rowing erg or a bike erg or something along those lines. If you want to see what these programs look like, you can see them for free. Just do the free trial on the app. Download it on the App Store, iOS or Android. There's a link down below. Agility stroke speed ladder drilling for different athletes. My example would be a judoka, but also info on general benefits, methods to train, what kind of drills to do, when to do it, how much to do, and how to improve jumping landing mechanics. I think this comment came before this week's video on plyometrics, so there's actually a video out there on the 3 phases of beginning plyometrics, and in terms of jumping and landing mechanics, have a look at those videos and you'll see a fairly good kind of snapshot of what we're looking for with landing mechanics. Landing mechanics are very, very simple. We don't want massive impact on the floor, particularly in our initial phases of training with plyometrics, so you don't want this incredible reactive force coming in. That usually means I want some pliability in my joints, so ankles, hips and knees all being slightly pliable when I land. Also, you'll get an audible cue, so it shouldn't be this really loud slap on the ground as if you're moving your feet in weightlifting or something like that. Now, for your question in terms of speed and agility drills, for the judoka, it actually has a very, very different need for speed and need for reaction times than someone like a soccer player or a hockey player would, and their use of something like a speed ladder is quite different. So there's some interesting studies done on reaction times with judokas versus other sports. Judo is a very kinesthetic sport, so my reaction time is very, very much defined by the feeling I have of movement. So if I'm holding Owen's collar and Owen goes to move, my reaction time is very, very quick on that kinesthetic feedback. Generally speaking, visual feedback for a judo athlete is far poorer than it would be for a ball sport or racket sport athlete. That, when we bring it into our speed and agility training, then means basically, if I'm using a visual or an audio cue for my speed and agility training, so if you've ever done these kind of drills where maybe the coach has two different color cones they're holding up, or maybe they'll call A, B, C, or D for what you have to do, or maybe it's a reaction time thing where someone will throw a ball, you'll hear a beep and you'll reach around and grab the ball. In those cases, that's not really what we're looking to do for speed and agility for a judoka. What we're probably looking to do is some sort of kinesthetic drill. So what it might be is you might be using a speed ladder for lateral movement over and back, and then you might have somebody, a training partner, suddenly pulling on your gi or something along those lines. You could also use something similar to a speed ladder, but just with lines of chalk on the floor, or just the lines that are on the mats in your training gym. And as you're doing those lateral movements, maybe it's for a foot sweep, maybe it's something along those lines of a hip throw. Once we get to that certain area on the mat, Owen or my training partner is going to tense up and pull back against the grip, and then I'll immediately move into that position. Speed and agility training is obviously important for developing the structures around that, so developing the tension and skill needed in those joints, developing the muscles, developing the tendons. But the massive area of speed and agility training that is underappreciated is the actual reaction time. So there's no real point as a judo athlete going in and out through speed ladders, just doing very basic 1 foot in, 1 foot out, 2 foot in, 2 foot out, maybe lateral movement across them. They can be useful for a warm-up routine. They can be useful for just getting some physical literacy in there. But generally speaking, you want to be working on those speed ladders with some sort of reaction time element to it. And of course, for judo, we want reaction time to be predominantly based on kinesthetics rather than audible or visual cues. How to incorporate strength/stroke weightlifting for paddle sports.
So when it comes to paddle sports, I don't know if you saw some of the clips from the recent Olympics. We've actually worked with a few different paddle sports over the years, oddly or randomly enough. You know, speed kayakers, some other individuals. There was a few different sports. It's hard to remember now exactly. But one of the big things is actually you need to be actually a pretty sick athlete for paddle sports. It's very, very interesting. It was quite surprising at the time. Obviously, we hadn't thought a whole lot about it. It's not exactly our usual demographic. But lo and behold, they do need a lot of strength training. And if you look at some of the recent clips from Paris, I think it was the Brazilian speed kayakers were yacked out of their mind. You know, more than gymnasts would be in terms of their arms and upper body musculature. So there's a couple of different things I'll be covering. I have a little list for you here. So obviously we're looking at big multi-joint compound movements. If we start with the upper body, bench press is going to be a big one. I'd be looking at strict press as well. Pull-ups, weighted pull-ups. Your ability to brace here is going to be hugely important. And you very often forget that pull-ups and weighted pull-ups are a very useful core exercise, and bracing under that weight while you're pulling yourself is going to be incredibly useful, while obviously training your lats is going to be massively important for the use of... Oh, my list is gone. So training your lats is going to be massively useful for paddleboarding. Then going to be look at stuff like straight arm lat pull downs, rear delt flies, back extensions, any amount of core work, knees to bar, toes to bar, front levers, planks, side planks, starfish planks, any rotational stuff, core work is going to be hugely beneficial to you. I'd push it for a bit of time under tension, but I also look to weight some of it. So I'd be looking for maybe some heavier weighted parallel sit-ups on a GHD, for example. Do push that core work pretty diligently as well, and that lower back work. Then I'm also be looking at a lot of mobility, of course, so thoracic movements, rotational, getting a lot of movement into the lats, your mid back, your traps, your lower back, having that nice and free and supple, having those shoulders pretty healthy and able to move and express your power really well. Squatting is going to be something you're definitely going to feature as well. Multi-joint, large compound movements are incredibly useful for coordination. So you might think, if I'm kayaking, I'm not really using my legs. I know you're bracing, you're going to have your legs in a certain position, but the ability to move load while coordinating everything is incredibly useful. So when you hear coordination outside the context of sports science, you think, oh, I can tie my laces or touch my nose and rub my belly as well. But coordination under heavy loads is a very different skill. So when we say coordination in terms of biomechanics or muscle physiology, we're really talking about a very specific attribute, and it's one that high-level athletes have in droves. And heavy back squats, especially if they're deeper back squats, are incredibly useful. Big deadlift, I'm going to be all over big deadlift as well. A lot of systemic stress, so at right times of year you're going to be doing this, but the ability to just move heavy weights, that ability to brace is going to be very useful for your paddle sports. Direct arm work, no brainer. Biceps, triceps, forearms, a lot of mobility on this as well, trying to build up the tolerance of it. The tissue, you're going to have to be conscious of overloading this because you don't want to get any kind of inflammation, but training these is going to be very important for health, longevity and power output. Power cleans, if we're looking at weightlifting, is probably something you're going to be doing, so moving as fast as possible. The ability to contract, relax and contract is going to be trained really usefully by the power clean. So this is something that's going to be very useful when you're trying to go from a full paddle or a full stroke or whatever the terminology is to the opposite side. So some muscles are relaxing, some muscles are contracting. And this is one of the major uses of the Olympic lifts, is going from a highly contracted state to a relaxed state to a contracted state. And we're trying to reduce the distance between full contraction and full relaxation and make that happen as quickly as possible, which is one of the great benefits. A lot of times people talk about the triple extension and full extension of the lifts, which is useful, but we can do that full extension elsewhere. It's that full extension under weight, which is really important, and that full extension then into relaxation is a big one. Then I'm going to be doing stuff like maybe some farmers carries, some offset farmers carries. We use them sometimes. They're a nice exercise. They're good in the right circumstances. Then we're going to be looking at, if you haven't touched on conditioning, but I'm doing a lot of assault bike, pushing close to your kind of lactic threshold, or the feeling of that lactic threshold. So a lot of that anaerobic work where we're assault bike is probably going to be one of my favorite ones, assuming training load is appropriate.
What's your favorite shoe for squatting, and will you ever make a squat hypertrophy program? So favorite shoe for squatting is definitely the Nike 2s. I also really like the Anta 2s, which I have. Now, if it was just favorite weightlifting shoes ever, it's definitely those Adidas 2008s that are on the wall there. But unfortunately, for someone like me with slightly longer legs and a terrible ankle mobility, they're not the best shoe for me. Next question then is, will you ever make a squat hypertrophy program? A lot of the initial phases of the RTA and RTA2 look exactly like what a squat hypertrophy program would look like. If you wanted a squat hypertrophy program, I'd take the RTA2 and run the first 6 to 8 weeks on a rinse and repeat with some additional leg volume in there, leg hypertrophy on the other day 3 and day 4 of the week. Obviously, there are only 2 sessions per week for both of those programs. Leg hypertrophy or quad hypertrophy, generally speaking, is going to be very, very easy. You just have to do a lot of volume. There's plenty of volume in the initial phases of both of those programs. Add stuff in like more single joint exercises, like those leg extension machines, simple leg press machine. Any of those are going to really help gain that mass on the quads. It seems you often recommend for the strength lifts, squat, bench and deadlift, moving from high bar reps 10 plus to lower reps 1 to 3 over about 8 to 12 weeks. What would be some pros and cons of doing the same rep progression over smaller periods of time, such as 4 or 6 weeks? For example, sets of 10 in week 1, sets of 8 in week 2, sets of 5s in week 3, sets of 3s in week 4, reset and add weight.
So the issue with this is you probably just don't have enough time to adapt to training over a meaningful time frame. So if we're saying 4 to 6 weeks, 6 is probably as short as I would make any kind of strength progression. If we're solely focused on strength and we're trying to progress the strength lifts, it'd be different for athletes. If we're a time constraint or for weightlifting, something like that would be a little bit different. It's not to say that it won't work, but you will need to reset and move on pretty frequently. So if you keep resetting, it'll probably take a little bit longer to get to the same destination. There is benefit to this length of time to a lot of adaptations. You know, if we do our first set of 10, it's going to be hard to pick those exact weights. So on that first set or that first session, if we have 4 sessions of 10s, for example, over the next 2 weeks, we have a little bit of time to select the appropriate weight and build into those weights. So you're going to undershoot a little bit those first sessions, as we've talked about before, being very, very important. And then by the second session or the end of the second week, you've a really good idea of that how hard or what weight that those last sets of 3x10 should be. And so then allows you to accumulate enough volume at that phase. We need to get multiple sessions. 1 week might not necessarily be enough, so we need to extend that out. So you're probably not going to be able to pick the weights super accurately, and then we're not going to have enough time at those higher volumes. So we need a sufficient length of time. And generally what we see is usually around that 8 weeks is probably the minimum we like to run it when we're looking at our programs. 6 is doable, but it's a pretty short time frame. 4 is quite short. Now, it's not so you can't do it, and how you would do that is essentially undershoot your first 4 weeks, then your next set of weeks you overload that in terms of let's say you do your first week of 10s, you do 4x10 at 100 kilos. The next time you come around to your 10s, do 4x10 at 105 kilos or 110 or however easy or hard it felt like it was. So you're making sure that you're overloading that. One thing I would do is have a little bit higher volume per session than we're doing if you had multiple weeks, say if you 2 weeks per rep scheme. Just overload that volume a little bit, or do a little bit more volume per session compared to what a per session would be if you're doing it in a longer time frame. So let's say we would normally do 3 to 4 sets of 10. Make sure you're doing kind of a minimum 5 to 6 sets of 10 in those 1 week carry rounds, just to make sure that you're hitting sufficient volume. You won't be able to hit the same amount of volume like you would over 2 weeks. You know, you're going to get a lot more. You're going to get 20 maybe sets of productive 10s if you're doing it maybe 2 or 3 weeks, depending on what way you're progressing it. But then if we're doing it once per week or 1 week of that, we're kind of halving our volume. So I would up that per session volume or per set to ensure that we're getting sufficient time. Again, it's not to say that it won't work, and definitely give it a try. You know, you're going to cost yourself, you're only going to cost yourself 3 months, 4 months in terms of training. It's still going to be productive training. It's still going to give you some results, but generally find that a little bit longer than those 1 week progressions for the most part is very, very beneficial. It's why we've made a lot of our programs on the app longer, because we get this feedback from the input in the app, so we can plan out a little bit further with people in their sessions. And you'll even see in the RTA 2 is 12 weeks long. Originally 8 weeks was, to be honest, a large part of those 8 weeks was, it's kind of the time frame where we were like, okay, this is how long are people going to commit to a program for? How long will they want to do something? And 8 weeks was, to be honest, just one of those time frames where we were like, okay, I think we can pin people down for 8 weeks and commit to a progression. But if you start getting a little bit longer, especially as a newer company, to be honest, people are going to be like, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, that's like 4 months. I'm not going to, I don't know. Whereas that 8 week period was like, okay, I can do 16 squat sessions, and obviously then the program is incredibly effective. So that's why some parts of the RTA 1 is actually hyper aggressive, is because we didn't have as much time to expose you to that volume. So that's why that week 4 day 2 is as it is because we had to go, right, we don't have the time to push you, so now we need to make you push the intensity and volume in certain sessions. And then this gives you the opportunity then to push yourself further than you thought you would. Program, as we knew, was incredibly effective, of literally thousands of PBs. So that's one of those reasons, though, that the RTA 2.0 is 12 weeks long, is we want a bit more time, and it's a little bit more enjoyable psychologically to run that program.
What's the best way to fit Zone 2 cardio in around strength training? I'm running the off-season program at the minute, and the sessions are getting a bit too long to add 45 minutes at the end. But I heard that it's not good to do anything apart from rest on your rest days.
So when it comes to fitting Zone 2 around strength training, so you're running our off-season, so this is actually a recommendation for anyone. The use of Zone 2 is the length of time you do Zone 2 is the benefit, but it is also the potential issues when it comes to Zone 2 training, is that, you know, a good Zone 2 session is at a minimum 30 minutes unless you're uber undertrained. It's not that they're super fatiguing, it's just that the time frame available to you is something that is the problem. And in this case, this is your problem. So what I would be recommending here is either doing it very early in the morning. You can do it fasted. There's some benefits to that, not major ones, but there certainly seems to be some health benefits to it, doing it fasted in the morning. The fasted versus fed state for cardio is that fed state cardio is more productive. But that's talking about endurance athletes. If we're looking at a strength training athlete, fasted cardio in the morning, totally fine. You're going to get all the benefits to your health, maybe even some extra ones, and you're going to be totally okay. So if that's an option for you, getting up early would be something I'd recommend. I totally understand adding in 30 to 60 minutes after training can be an issue. However, because you said you're running the off-season athlete, you could possibly add this in on your off days. What you could do is slightly shorter volume sessions to a little bit of higher frequency. So let's say at the moment you're running 4 sessions per week because you're doing the off-season program. I'm assuming you're an athlete, but you're doing off-season for strength training, say, but maybe for an athlete you might be used to some conditioning. What you could do here is add in 3 extra sessions. Start with 2 sessions at the start and start with 20 minutes. Let's say, assume you've no exposure to conditioning. 20 minutes, just make this nice and consistent. And when you feel like those 20 minutes are pretty reasonable, add it in the 3rd session at 20 minutes. Then we can slowly up the volume of that by 5 or 10 minutes per session until you feel comfortable over the next coming weeks or even months. If you're very new to conditioning and you're a strength athlete, this could take 6 months to a year and a half of reasonable adaptations. It'll become very comfortable for you a while. It is going to be very beneficial for your strength training, but from there, slowly increase those on your off days if that's available to you. Now, if it's not available to you and you just can't really fit in, or you don't want to fit in these longer steady state sessions, if you have a lower frequency available to you, you can do much higher volume per session. Here we're really looking at a minimum of an hour if we're reduced that frequency. So let's say we've got 2 1-hour sessions per week or a little bit more. You can definitely add in a longer steady state session. Here you're probably going to need to get some kind of heart rate monitor, wattage, caloric consumption monitor. Heart rate is great. They're pretty cheap and you can get them pretty widely available. Then we're going to be looking at figuring out what zone 2 is for you. I don't necessarily need you to go test your maximum heart rate here. Again, we don't need any lactic thresholds. If you're a non-specific endurance-based athlete, if you're doing something else, what we can do here is just, what can you maintain? What heart rate can you maintain that has you sweaty by the end of the hour? You've definitely done a bit of training and your heart rate's probably going to be somewhere in the region of 120. It could be 130, maybe a little bit higher depending on how out of shape you are. So we need to make sure that this is a pace that if someone said you have to do this for 2 hours is something you could do, or 3 hours. And that's what we want to start with. And we don't really want to push those numbers anyway crazily. So if we're doing these higher volume, short, lower frequency sessions, we're looking at keeping it zone 2, but we want to push that a little bit as the weeks go on. So let's say you start, you measure your heart rate, you found a pace that on the stationary bike or the rower that you can maintain for hours. It's not very intense, but you're definitely, by the end of the hour, you should be somewhat fatigued. Figure out what this heart rate is, and then over the course of the weeks, if you want to push it, you can push this a little bit further. I personally like to use calories consumed just because the heart rate monitor I have is just an easy way of doing this. So what I'm doing at the moment, I'm trying to work up to about 1,000 to 1,200 calories in an hour of steady state conditioning. Some of that does go out of zone 2 for me. I get into the late 130s towards the end when I'm trying to make up that block of calories. So for me, I will try and make up most of it at 125-ish beats per minute, and then I'll usually get to about 700 calories in 40 minutes, 45, and then the last 15 I'll try and pick up the pace and get closer to that. So there's just some options for you. Lastly, if you don't want to do conditioning, you'll get all of the health benefits and more of just doing some high intensity aerobic stuff. So Tabata, you can get this done in 15 minutes. Just destroy yourself on an assault bike. You actually don't need to worry about programming here. We don't need to be worrying about rest times and active times. Just pick a time frame and go to town yourself. Do as much as you can in a reasonably short time frame. Like near puking, don't puke by the end. I know like some people are like, that's a terrible recommendation, but if you just want to get conditioning in, you're in the off season, you don't have anything major coming up, you'll adapt to this much quicker than you think you would. Twice a week, maximum 15 minutes, start with 10 minutes and just get as many calories in on the assault bike as you can in 10 minutes. You'll limit yourself pretty reasonably and it's going to be super productive.
My overhead squat is 57.5 kilos and my current max snatch is 60 kilos. 62.5 kilos is basically made too. Should my overhead squat be improved? The first thing here is that overhead squat and snatch numbers really don't need to correlate all that much. You'll find the vast majority of competitive weightlifters don't ever do overhead squats. The only time they'll occur is maybe in a snatch complex, maybe in a snatch balance complex. Now, is this something you should be concerned about? Absolutely it is. Yeah, if you can't do an overhead squat with 2.5 kilos or possibly even 5 kilos less than your 1 rep max. There's something going on here. Just to give some background, why might an overhead squat be more difficult? Well, the first thing is you have to get it over your head, so the eventual height you have to get that barbell to is a lot higher. Now, granted, you're probably starting out of a squat rack, so it's a behind the neck jerk with a wide grip, so it's not quite that difficult. But for people with very low overhead or upper body strength, it can be difficult just to get the barbell up there in the first place. And the second thing is because you're sitting all the way down into the bottom of a squat, the barbell gains far more momentum and will have a much higher impact speed into the bottom position than it will in the snatch. In the snatch, a lot of the time you're actually catching that barbell pretty close to the top of its trajectory, and the downward velocity is very, very low. Whereas as we sit down into a squat, a lot of the time the downward velocity can actually be quite high by the time we hit the bottom position. Now, what does this mean for you? Now, first thing, you have to look at what your snatch looks like. Do you look like a floppy dead fish in the bottom of the snatch catch position? Are you losing all of those joint integrity pieces? Are you rounding your lower back? Is it slamming you into the bottom position? Is it very ropey when you catch the barbell? If the answer is yes, then you really should be working on those overhead positions. Even doing a small amount of overhead squat training in your training sessions won't be a bad thing. But if you look like good snatch technique, and it's just something where you need to gain some overhead strength and stability, as well as some squat strength, I would have no doubt that not doing overhead squats won't hold you back in your training at all. So it really comes down to your particular case, your particular needs, and what the snatch looks like, rather than what the overhead squat looks like before you move on. I've been lifting for 6 years, and maybe since 1 year switched to false grip because my forearms have started hurting quite a bit. Recently started doing general mobility work. Does anyone have any tips on specific work to incorporate to be able to use a regular grip instead of a false grip, and also narrow grip for more tightness?
We actually can't help you with the specific pain questions here, as we don't do injury questions, but what I can help you with here is that you shouldn't change your technique to accommodate for pain unless there's big stakes on the line. So it's 2 weeks before a competition and there's a lot of money on the line, or your life as an athlete. For everyone else, if for a normal technique which fits smart parameters or relatively smart parameters of technique or good technique, don't change something that didn't cause pain before. Don't change a way to avoid it. Figure out what the issue is. Stop if you need to, regress if you need to, go see someone if you need to. Don't put on elbow sleeves and wrist wraps to accommodate for the pain. It's okay for a session or two, but if it's something that's been going on for years, you need to figure out what the issue is and not adjust technique, because you're only going to probably end up with a worse injury in the long run. So no help on the specifics, but just as a general rule of thumb, that's definitely a bad idea and a recipe for disaster. It's something we've seen hugely. You'll see a lifter doing something, suddenly a couple of months later they've changed the technique, and you're like, why are you squatting like your good morning and everything? They're like, oh, my knees are really sore. And we're like, that's not the answer. Figure out what's wrong with your knees, then come back.
What can we expect naturally for squat numbers? I've hit 180 high bar ass to grass with my entire focus being on hypertrophy. If someone like me focused more on strength, what would the ballpark be number wise? I'm talking average guy genetics, 5'11", 200 pounds, etc.
Don't you say number, I'll say number.
Are you going to say a number?
200.
Right.
What's your number?
The problem is here, average guy genetics don't exist, right? So everyone sits on that bell curve. There's a bracket at the top where the average number exists for what your genetic potential is going to be in the squat. Unfortunately, a massive amount of things that happen in your life leading up to that squat and after the point where your genetics were handed over to you have a huge influence. Did you play sport? What body weight did you walk around with for the last 10 years? What do your squats look like? How good are those mechanics? How hard are you training? What does your life look like outside of squatting? Do you have a highly stressful job? Do you get good quality sleep? Do you have any neurological things going on that cause you to recover slower than somebody else? There is no average number. Now, if you've done 180 high bar, ass to grass, while focusing on hypertrophy, you could do 200. As Owen said, that was the number I was going to say. I don't really think... I think you'd really have to work hard to program incorrectly not to be able to hit 200, basically. I think 200 is certainly within the grasp of it. The other thing I want to say is that we don't have good data for what average people could optimally hit for their squats, because nobody consistently programs and trains optimally for their entire training career, right? So most people who are lifting weights now will start lifting weights around 18 to 21 or 22 years old. Usually college age kids start squatting or start focusing on strength training a bit more, certainly where we're living. In those cases, they will rarely stick at good training plans for 10 years without taking massive breaks from training. In almost no cases will they make it through 10 years of training without being injured in some way. And I've yet to come across the person who has stuck to a single style of training and programming for the entirety of a decade to be able to say, this is what's absolutely optimal. If those people are out there, they're probably jumping on gear after 3 or 4 years because they have the ability now, the neurological makeup to be able to go on and hit massive numbers. I think 200 kilos is definitely very doable. A few months ago, or maybe last year sometime, we talked about how rare it is to actually have someone squatting 200 kilos. I think we have a massive tilted perspective at the moment because we're just used to following strong guys and girls on Instagram. And then suddenly it comes to the point where every single day we're seeing people squatting astronomical weights, like Owen, squatting absolutely huge weights. And you suddenly think that's in some way normal. That's in no way normal. Like, go to any normal gym you train at. If you're watching these videos and commenting on our stuff, you're probably training in a strength training gym or around strength training people, which skews your perspective even before you start laying into this. So doing what you've already done puts you so far beyond what the average person has ever achieved in terms of strength numbers. I think 200 kilos is certainly doable, and probably more than that is certainly doable. But my general consensus on this is there is no average. There is no good data out there on it.
Everybody sucks. I heard a statistic that 4,000 people can deadlift 300 kilos or more. I assume that's going by from powerlifting or something.
Okay, that's mad.
So not many.
Running shoes for heavier people. 2 things on this. First thing, Brooks Ghost are very good. I think it's Brooks Ghost. I have. A lot of running shoes are very, very good. I wouldn't be massively inclined to focus in on that as being a key defining factor of what's going to be successful if you're a heavier person, for you avoiding some of those repetitive strain style injuries. What I will say is, don't go barefoot for your running work. It's a terrible idea. Take it from somebody who made that terrible decision a number of years ago. Get an actual running shoe. My main piece of advice is go to an actual running shoe purveyor. Go to somebody, if you're in Cork, go to John Buckley's. They're unbelievable. They'll tell you what shoes you need to get, and they'll usually be right about it. If you're in another place, I'm sorry, just go and find a good shop that has good knowledgeable people and talk to them about what you're trying to do. The final piece on this would be the stuff that a lot of the time we're looking for a shoe to help us with, right? Avoiding more of those RSI style injuries, bit more springiness, bit better running economy further on into those longer runs, lack of tissue breakdown like blisters and all those things in your feet. Most of those things should be avoided ever before we come to selecting a shoe. So whether it's the repetitive strain style injuries of the ankles and tendons around the ligaments and tendons around the ankle, we should be doing those base level plyometrics to get away with it. Owen famously in one of my training vlogs years ago quoted as saying, you can do plyometrics, you can tape up your ankles, you choose which one you want, but you should definitely be doing plyometrics. Then when we look at the better running economy, very few recreational runners actually get run coaching and look at the positions they're running in. Most of the time they'll just get a watch and pay €800 for a running watch and then never get some very baseline coaching for running because they think, oh, I'm just running 5s and 10Ks, doesn't really matter. It will make a massive difference. And the final thing then is looking at the larger impacts, or looking at the wear style things that will happen. If you get a shoe that fits you correctly, it's far more important than it being the optimal model or the brand new version of the Nike Carbon Fly Expresses or whatever it is. The actual fit of the shoe and having somebody fitting that shoe to you makes a huge difference. Relaxed or straight arms in the pull?
Relaxed arms is definitely better. Straight arms, forcefully straight arms, can essentially add the same issue or close to the same issue as bent arms. So the issue with bent arms is that when we're going to, first of all, finish our extension and turn the barbell over, we have less of those arms available to us to follow through with this pull. If we get to the hip in this bent position, generally we'll either need to straighten them again as we pull the barbell over, so we will probably swing the barbell, or we'll be limiting our capacity to turn the barbell over and turn it over too early. The other issue then is, of course, that we're shifting the load to our arms. It's a weaker muscle. Your arms aren't stronger than your legs or your back. Your body is incredibly intuitive. It's very good at protecting yourselves. Generally, barbell speed will slow down if you begin rowing with your arms, because your body understands that your arms aren't able to withstand as much force as your legs or back, for example. So when we shift to that arms, they're weaker, so we're not able to move the barbell as quickly, which is definitely something that we need to happen, is a faster barbell speed coming into the hip. So relaxed arms is best. Straight arms is still better than pulling with your arms. The issue with really taut straight arms is we could have a similar issue happening here, whereas bent arms or flexed arms are going to put the weight in our arms. Super straight arms could also do that, so a relaxed arm is better. However, whatever gets rid of your arm bend is still a step above having that arm bend. So if super straight arms is the only thing that works right now, then go for that.
Why does lower contact in the clean feel worse than the snatch?
So essentially, it's further away from your center of mass. This is the main reason. The barbell is going to be heavier in the clean as well, but it's also going to be further away from you. So if we think about where the barbell hits in the snatch, it's really close to our center of mass. It's over our center for support. Our legs are really far under the barbell. Hopefully your feet are relatively flat. So this is a great position to express power from. However, we're making contact really low in the clean. We're giving ourselves this opportunity then to move that barbell a really far distance away from us in the turnover. So this S bar pad is super far away from you. So then we end up with this heavier barbell or heavier feeling barbell. It feels slower. The barbell's already heavier in the clean compared to the snatch. So the barbell's going to be moving slower. You're going to have to be putting more force. So not only have we this heavier barbell to move, we're also moving it in a slightly more disadvantaged position. Now, it shouldn't feel worse, because if you understand the clean and the snatch as you spend decades lifting, it'll feel more appropriate and it won't feel better or worse. It'll just feel like different lifts. But the main issue is it's going to be further away from you than it is at your hip.
Things we've changed our mind on in training. Well, I'll tell you what I changed my mind on in training. This is coming from 16 years this January. So the first one is everybody in elite or professional sport is on drugs. If you find the one or two guys and girls who aren't, everyone they're playing else is on drugs in every sport in every country. The second one then is how quickly progress can be made. So as we went through different structures when I was playing rugby, different S&C coaches, you'd always be making progress. But until I kind of got out of university and started training with different groups of people, you saw just how quickly progress could be made. Now, a lot of that comes down to better programming, better coaching, better approach to how those sessions are being laid out. But it also comes down to that thing of where you're seeing other people making progress. Suddenly that ceiling kind of gets broken. So if I was to go and do a squat program, let's say as an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old when I was still playing rugby, doing a squat phase of training like that and getting a 10 kilo PB would have been great for me. Whereas a number of years down the road, 10 kilo PBs were basically guaranteed and in the bag, and I'd be expecting much more in the 2 or 3x of that for a squat cycle. The final one then is the relative ability of people to follow through on training blocks. A lot of the people I trained with from that kind of younger years, everyone's bought in and buy-in was never a question. You obviously had those people who mightn't show up to training sessions or whatever, but usually the people you're hanging around with were pretty bought in and would do what they needed to do to get better. In the general fitness sphere, since I've come in here, I realised there's a lot of people with one foot in and one foot out, and that was somewhat of a mind changer for me. Core training for explosiveness.
So the answer here is any core training. We don't use a whole lot of possibly what you might mean by this, rotational ball slams or ball slams. They're definitely in there at times for certain athletes, but it's not a blanket recommendation where if someone says I need to be more powerful, it's not somewhere where we're going to immediately come in and be like, right, we need lateral wall slams, we need what do they call them, those D-ball wall slams, although the D-ball would help. We're looking at stuff like, obviously your sport-specific skill, ability there, general core training, obviously lots of strength training the way we do strength training, but in terms of core work for explosiveness, there really isn't anything majorly that we do that will be super insightful that nobody else is doing. You'll find general core work in a lot of our programs, and it's super useful, and that should cover your bases for that. That'll help support that explosiveness. But there's nothing really there I'm like, this one is the one that's going to just blow up your explosiveness. It's a fair question. And I know if we watch a lot of Instagram clips or videos and we're like, these 5 core exercises for explosiveness, but the core isn't going to be that real linchpin. You know, if you've got a super strong core, but you can barely back squat body weight, you're probably not going to be super explosive.
What does a squat hypertrophy phase look like for long-term squat progress? So I want to take you back to when we talked about the RTA earlier, and we talked about the initial weeks, the initial month of the RTA 1 and the initial month and a half of the RTA 2 looking like very high volume phases of training. This is pretty much what a hypertrophy phase would look like, but in terms of long-term squat progression and planning out of hypertrophy phases, if we say they're the requisite sets, reps and load we need to be doing, we're going to add in some accessory work where we need to do it, then the big thing you have to look after is that caloric balance. So when we're looking to gain weight, we need to make sure there's sufficient amount of protein there, but most importantly, there is sufficient energy for your body to say, okay, we can actually afford to pack on that small amount of lean tissue mass we're going to gain. In terms of where we want to gain it, quads, glutes, back, and specifically in the upper back when we're looking at high bar progression. A lot of the time we'll see people, particularly in weightlifting, as they're kind of moving up through the weight classes, they'll gain the weight in their lower body, they'll put on the weight and size they need in their legs, which is great, which is definitely needed for the pull and the catching position, but they'll really lack that tightness or security in the upper back during their squats, to the point where we'll see this real extension of the neck. We'll see people losing that mid-back position as they're standing up out of the bottom position. And just with a small bit of pointed hypertrophy work, as we go through those 4 years of squat training, it will massively decrease the likelihood of that happening. The final thing then will just be, as we're looking to increase the calories to make sure hypertrophy, we're in a good environment for hypertrophy to happen, be wary that those increasing calories can force us or allow us to do more volume in training, but also they're going to allow us to recover a small bit better. Now, when we go into those hypertrophy phases, if I'm looking to actively get bigger and heavier in the hypertrophy phase, I shouldn't be utilizing all of those extra calories in extra training and extra recovery from that extra training. I should have that slight little bit of an edge, or maybe take 10% of that cutting off of it. That's going to be, if I was running the RTA on maintenance versus running the RTA in a large hypertrophy or weight gaining phase, I should have about 10% less hassle or 10% less pain when I'm doing it in the hypertrophy or gaining phase. Biggest area for improvement you see in new clients?
It's actually a really good question. Probably spent more hours thinking about this, we'd get a lot more, but I think Darren and I's answer would be quite similar here, but you can probably take for all these Q&As, because we obviously list out all the questions before we do this. But first place is just learning the rhythms of training, learning how to be intense, you need to be intense, how to be relaxed, you need to be relaxed, how to deal with injuries. So just a general scope of training. So that's obviously something we're going to help you with by programming for you, whether you're on the app or you're a one-to-one client. This is something that takes a while to learn, and it's not necessarily a criticism of that athlete, because they're just skills of that client that they need to learn as the years go by. This is probably the biggest thing, is that to understand how to train and understand that whole bubble of training, just understanding the rhythms of training as the years go by and how you can be more effective as an athlete. So again, this is something that needs improvement, but it's not really a criticism. Realistic expectations is probably the second one. The realistic expectations is quite interesting. So we'll get people saying, could I add 50 kilos to my back squat in 2 months? Or they'll say something like, I'm at 100, 120 now, I have a weightlifting competition in 6 weeks. Can I do 120, 160 to qualify for nationals? We'll get things like that. And they're well-meaning, and I don't think they're stupid people whatsoever. But setting expectations that are more realistic is very, very important. Or you'll have that question, but at the same time, the person will have just been experiencing a major injury, and you'd be surprised how often they come up. So in that case, then we just need to make expectations realistic. Or there'll be more subtle ones where there'll be, I want to, for example, the rise in hybrid athletes is something, you know, we're guilty of it ourselves, but this expectation of being, I want to squat 600 pounds, but also have probably a 6-minute mile or something like that, or a 7-minute mile, when currently they're squatting 180 kilos or something like that, and they haven't ran before. They're the kind of expectations where you need to be like, look, could be possible for you, but it's going to take a lot longer than you may think it's going to take. Then we kind of have kind of removing baggage. Sometimes we will reject clients, so we're quite selective at the moment of one-to-one athletes, for example. We have a very low number of one-to-one athletes. We used to have a lot more. Now we have less one-to-one athletes for multiple reasons, but sometimes you'll have what I'll call baggage, where you'll have something like that athlete will have taken PDs before. They'll start training with you. If you suspect them of using PDs, you'll say, look, did you use any PDs in the past? Obviously, if you've watched enough of us and you're looking for one-to-one coaching, you know we don't give a single fuck. But it's important to ask, and are you on PDs now, or do you plan to use PDs again in the future? And they'll get say, no, I didn't use PDs, and they'll have squatted, again, let's say 270 kilos. And you're like, right. We start training, and then they're 100 kilos below their best squat, and the best squat was 10 kilos of body weight ago, or it was a similar body weight, and it was done last year, or a relatively recent time frame. And you're like, anything you want to tell me? Is there anything here that you want to mention about what happened with that squat? Was there anything different you were doing when you were squatting? Were your shoes different? Was your nutrition different? That hasn't happened a huge amount, but that is something that has happened more than once. So it is quite interesting. So coming at a coaching relationship with a little bit less baggage is important, understanding to be honest with that coach or whoever you're coaching, not just us, and then making sure that you're telling the truth. A fourth one is a quite interesting one. It's understand if you're the problem. Sometimes we'll get emails and a red flag will go up, and I've talked to other coaches about this, and you'll see them having got coached by loads of other people we know are different people, a lot in recent years. Way too much that you could ever give that coach honest time to get you progress. So in the last 2 years, they might have had 4 different coaches, and they'll be told an email, and you'll be like, oh. Generally, this is an indicator, and we've been coaching for, I don't know how long now, between the two of us, it must be probably 30 odd years, maybe like 25 or 26 years. So we've a little bit of experience, and usually in this case, you're like, oh no, that's usually a bad sign, because that person hasn't been able to set expectations, work with a coach effectively. It's not that that person's a bad athlete, but there's other issues going on there, and that's the areas of improvement that person needs to make are generally an indicator of having had multiple different coaches. Now, is it possible that all those coaches didn't work for them? For sure, but it is just an interesting area that we would see.
Do field athletes need to deadlift? The first thing here is what field sport are they playing? Hockey, rugby, soccer, football, whatever it is. Let's just say generally, field athletes do need to deadlift. Now, is that a conventional deadlift? Is that an RDL? Is that a sumo deadlift? Is that a hex bar deadlift? Well, let's just put it into 2 categories. Conventional deadlifts and RDLs are useful. Hex bar deadlifts aren't going to be useful for the context we're talking about it now, but I'll briefly touch on them at the end. And then sumo deadlifts pretty much don't have a place. The first reason why deadlifting or hip hinging is very important is that a massive amount of the injuries we see in field sports are hamstring related injuries. So they're hamstring tears, hamstring strains. Every field sport athlete is going to get them at some point or another, particularly as we go later on into the season. The body becomes a bit more fatigued. The integrity of those hamstrings doesn't seem to be quite as good, particularly as we get later into the winter and the pitches get a small bit heavier and we get more water standing on them. We see more hamstring tears. Now, conventional deadlifts and RDLs, really, really good for those and developing the hamstrings. Some of the other deadlifts, like the hex bar deadlifts, aren't really going to develop the hamstrings in the same way. The next reason we need to be deadlifting or doing some sort of heavy hip hinging is we need large bipedal load. Now, large bipedal load can come in the form of a high bar back squat. It can come in the form of a hex bar deadlift, come in the form of a conventional deadlift. But at any rate, Athletes need to be producing a massive amount of force with both legs pushing through the floor. We usually don't want to be that on a machine or some sort of constraint around a machine where it's a hack squat machine or something along those lines. We're really not getting the same level of motor pattern development or athletic development that we'll get with free weights. Why might a deadlift be used in this case, or a hex bar deadlift be used in this case, rather than a high bar back squat? Well, usually the barrier for entry on both of those lifts is considerably lower than getting an athlete into good high bar back squat positions. If we have a group of 22 athletes coming into the gym, they're not in the gym multiple times per week. Maybe we only have a touch point with them once per week. We can get them to grab onto a barbell or grab onto a hex bar and get that effective bipedal loading there. The final thing to consider then is that with the deadlift, whether that be conventional deadlift, RDL or hex bar deadlift, we should be hyper aware of large amounts of CNS fatigue that comes along with that. So fatigue of the central nervous system is hand in hand with that large bipedal load. In order to put large amounts of force through the ground with both of our legs, we have to be firing massive amounts of muscle tendon units on both our legs and our back and our glutes and all of those good places, and that leads to a large amount of central nervous system fatigue. So in season, if Owen has a game on Saturday, do I want him maxing his deadlift on Thursday morning? Absolutely not. Terrible idea. Lots of central nervous system fatigue will follow on from that. For maximal deadlifts, we've seen in studies that central nervous system fatigue lasting for as much as 11 days following for that maximal attempt. So we really want to be conscious of that. Off season is great. Sub-maximal attempts in season are great. But deadlifts are incredibly useful for field sports athletes. Returning to training after a long break.
So there wasn't a specific sport given here or goals. So there's two things we need to obey here. One is manage expectations. So whether that be from training after injury, sickness, or you decided to take a long break, maybe you're traveling or just didn't want to train, the first place here is to manage expectations. Past accomplishments, unfortunately here, if it's a long break, don't have any bearing on what lifts you should be doing now or what you can expect from training in the future. Or rather, at least you shouldn't act like that. You should act like you're just beginning training again, you're very new to the sport or whatever you're doing. And that brings the second point, which is progress much slower than you think you need to ensure that we don't get injured, that you get time to practice with those weights. Those weights probably will come back, or whatever sport you're doing, assuming it's strength training or something related here, they will come back. So just give yourself time and manage those expectations. Be super calm and relaxed at training. Don't get too hyped up too early. Don't try and come in and set your maxes before. Just see where you're at. Come in with the default assumption that you suck, your training hasn't been good, you haven't been training, and you need to act like that. So you need to go super calmly and relaxed into training and just do what needs to be done, progress slowly, take the good days as they come, and if there's good days happen, that's fantastic, and give yourself time to build in before you really start getting super aggressive with the training.
Front squats for powerlifting and bodybuilding how-to. To start this off, front squats for powerlifting and front squats for bodybuilding are very, very different. Let's just say front squats for quad development and some anterior core strength, just to make this a small bit easier. The first thing is, in both groups, powerlifters and bodybuilders are usually going to have terrible external rotation of the shoulders, leading to very bad front rack positions. This is why we'll see those crossover grips or maybe gripping with straps. To be honest, I think you should be doing both the mobility work you need to gain better front rack positions and utilizing one of those variants where maybe you use straps or maybe you use the crossover grip or fingertip grips, and you should be doing both of those at the same time. In the ideal case, a powerlifter or a bodybuilder while front squatting will have a really nice clean grip on the barbell. This will lead to the best upper back position. It will also lead to the heaviest possible weights and the best possible squats overall. The next thing to consider is that those quad dominant mechanics of the squat don't come naturally to either of those groups. So powerlifters will tend to have, and I'm generally grouping powerlifters into kind of low bar back squat powerlifters here, they'll tend to have a more quad or hip and posterior dominant squat. They'll tend to want to keep those shins more vertical. They'll tend not to get their knees forward quite so much. In the case of the front squat, if we start emulating those mechanics in the front squat, we'll just really start fatiguing the upper back, the elbows, the wrists, the hands, and putting ourselves in really not great positions for not a massive amount of quad development coming along with it. So in that case, we really want to be pushing those knees forward, really increasing the leverage we get. So maybe if you're a powerlifter or a bodybuilder looking to get into some front squats, start with front squats on a machine, or front squats where you have extra raise underneath your heel, just to allow you to push those knees forward, get more quad dominance going on, and then gradually take out those extra heel increases or move away from the Smith machine once you've kind of figured out what the movement pattern needs to be. The final thing then is just beware that there is a significantly higher level of midline fatigue that comes along with front squats that doesn't come along with back squats. So in my opinion, if you want to develop that kind of quad dominant squat, increase the amount of quad hypertrophy going on, use the high bar back squat as a much better tool to get there rather than using the front squat. How many off seasons a year for soccer?
So when it comes to soccer, you're probably going to be forced into an off season dictated by the nature of your sports. You're probably going to have an in season and an off season, times when you aren't playing games. The big thing here is that you want to use your off season as productively as possible, build as much muscle mass, as strength as you need to or as you want to, whatever makes the most sense for you. Keep your conditioning going. Maybe you do some power and speed stuff then in your pre-season or at the last section of the off-season. Then your big goal for the in-season is maintaining this as much as possible, maintaining as much muscle mass while being fresh for games, maintaining as much strength while being fresh for games, maintain your conditioning and speed as best you can, again, while prioritizing playing your games. So the issue here is the issue that a lot of people will run into in sports, and it's a lot of the arguments around concurrent periodization versus block periodization, is that, you know, if you're a field sport athlete, you could have a lot of games per year. You could have 20, 30 games per year in your season. And so the issue here is that you can only really use your one off seasons. So unless you have some particular dynamics around your sport in soccer, then in your particular place have different seasons, or you have a break in the middle, which sometimes some sports do. Sometimes they get a little mid-season break. You know, you might get 3 or 4 weeks. In this case, then you can do a little mini off season. You won't be able to get super far. The big thing here, though, is just to try and get a few quality sessions in. You won't be able to get back to the volume or frequency of your strength training sessions that you were doing in the off season, at the height of your off season, but you will be able to get back to some semblance of increased volume. So take this time away from the pitch stuff to just try and build back a little bit of muscle mass, build back a little bit of strength with those movements that you're familiar with. You know, maybe if it's 3 or 4 weeks, you'll be able to get a little bit of freshness here. At the same time, you do need to balance resting as well in this in-season break, because this is very important, because you need to freshen up for the later games. So there is going to be a tail of fatigue from this kind of mini off-season that you might have in the middle if you have a break. And so you need to be cautious of pushing your values a little bit to get back some shape, but not so far that then when you come back into the season, you're super fatigued again.
5-year plan for Thai kickboxing. I'm going to assume that you've never done Thai kickboxing. You watched a highlight video last night and you want to start right now, and this is what I do. The first year of training, you just get as much exposure as humanly possible. You find a really good gym with a good group of people and great coaches there, and you just go as often as you can. You immerse yourself in it, figure it out if it's for you, enjoy the sport, get as much touch point with that sport as possible. If people are going to comps, you go to comps. If people are going to seminars, you go to seminars. Year 2 and 3, look to develop those skills a small bit more. So maybe it was where you just went Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Now you might need 1 or 2 personal sessions additionally each week. You might also need to go to another gym once every 2 weeks or twice per month just to get some additional sparring in. The second thing that comes along with the second phase is you should be looking to optimize your physique for what the best case scenario is in it. So if you have an understanding that at my weight class, this is what my general physique should look like, this is what my performance value should look like, this is how fit all of the other great fighters at my weight class are, this is how muscular they are, this is how explosive they are, and you want to be molding yourself into that. So bringing in those direct S&C pieces with that, moving in that direction. Once you're 3 or 4 years in, the best thing you can possibly do is move to Thailand and just train full time. With this sport, as with all other sports, you just need as much time training as you possibly can. And you'll see it in weightlifting, you'll see it with people optimizing their lives where their work environment can fit in really well, and then they can train as hard as they possibly want. Or maybe they get a remote working job so they can work much closer to the gym or work at home and they'll rest throughout the day. You really want to be optimizing your life to be as close to the gym and training as possible, recovering as best you can, setting up your life, and that's setting up your relationship, your diet, your habits to recover as best you possibly can and to reduce stress in every other area. This is where that kind of selfish thing for athletes comes in, but that really is what you want. If you want a 5-year plan to being a pro Thai kickboxer, let's hope you've got the genetics and just try and kickbox as much as you possibly can. Are Bulgarians enough for single leg work?
Yes. So for the most part, your large amount of your leg strength is going to be taken by bipedal training or bilateral loading. So back squats, to a certain extent deadlifts, and maybe if you're doing some Olympic lifts, depending on what you're doing. So for the most part, they're going to be doing it, front squats, belt squats, whatever you're doing. When it comes to single leg work, sufficient intensity and volume on one single leg exercise can be enough. You don't really need to start adding multiple ones. 2 different ones could be of value if you have a specific need for it. But if you become an absolute beast on Bulgarians, if you're back squatting 200 kilos and you can rep out 100, 110, maybe 120 kilos on a Bulgarian back squat or Bulgarian split squat with a barbell on your back, then you're going to have a pretty strong, and I'd have a hard time justifying giving you another single leg exercise unless it was for a super specific need. So if you push Bulgarians sufficiently, then it can be incredibly valuable. I've had powerlifters who I've pushed Bulgarians into, for example, if they're squatting 230 low bar, we'd be doing 150 kilo Bulgarians for 2 or 3 reps for, 2 or 3 sets. You don't necessarily have to go this far, but it's definitely more than enough to what you want from it. Extra ones aren't necessarily needed. It's going to cover a lot of it from the bilateral work you're doing. So then when you add in that single leg work, you'll have most of your bases covered. So Bulgarians are certainly, if you find them useful, you can load them properly, you can do them safely, and you have a smart way of progressing them, are definitely going to be more than enough single leg work for you.
Trying to increase body weight by 10 kilos as an athlete, how fast?
So the issue here is, what are your genetics like, what age are you, and what sport are you playing? So if you're 17 years old, you're a freak of nature, and you're doing a power-based sports like you're throwing, you're wrestling, judo, something like that, then increasing 10 kilos is something, you could do that over a summer. Just eating correctly, training a little bit harder. You could feasibly do that very, very unsloppily, unmessily. You won't have boobies after. You can do this in a really nice, sufficient manner. Lots of athletes have done it, where they've gone from, let's say, 85 kilos to 95. They've been talented athletes. They've had a big base of training. They had a bit of an off season. They increased their calories and they put on a lot of quality mass. You've got lots of raging hormones in your system as a teenager. You're getting your sleep in. You're good quality nutrition. You've access to some decent supplements now. Maybe you've got a little bit of funds available to you. This can happen in a few weeks. However, if you're a 32-year-old rugby player who's absolutely destroyed, or you're a 37-year-old 4-stripe white belt in jiu-jitsu, adding 10 kilos could be the worst decision in your athletic career. For that rugby player, unless it's time to start doing a few PDs, now assuming you're not an absolute freak of nature when you probably wouldn't need to gain that 10 kilos, but let's say you're that 32-year-old rugby player, hopefully I'm not singling anyone out here, you're pretty decent, but trying to gain 10 kilos, especially as a natural athlete, is something that would need to be done over the course of, I'm going to say a year, maybe even longer. Might not even be feasible to do without gaining a fairly sizable chunk of fat tissue with it. 10 kilos is a lot of body weight, especially the heavier you get. So if you're 50 kilos going from 50 to 60, might feel like a lot to you, but it's in reality it's a very small amount of weight. But if you're kind of in that median bell curve for your sport, whatever that is, adding 10 kilos is a lot of weight, especially if you're older. So once you start getting past that middle 20s even, 10 kilos can be a hairy decision to make. So I would just caution you, do it smartly. We do like people to use good nutritionists. Alex Keekel does my nutrition, has done for the last year and a half. He's worked with Dara for periods when he's in the middle of his running block. Obviously, with some injuries this year. So, but getting nutrition can be really useful here. You don't have to, but it can make things a lot easier. But I would say just be cautious, put the context on your situation, because 10 kilos for, again, that 17-year-olds, if you're a unit and you're training hard, might actually be hard for you to gain 10 kilos. You need to put a lot of work into it. Whereas your mid to late 30s playing C-level rugby, you can gain 10 kilos of fat real fast, and it will not be good for your sport or your relationship.
It's that harder to lose it than it is to put it on.
Well, the best way to lose fat is never get fat. That's from Jim Wendler.
Rugby focused push-pull split look like for a winger. This is going to seem crass, but the term rugby focused push-pull split should never ever be used. This is the idea of push-pull splits, upper-lower splits, any of that is horseshit when it comes to sport S&C. And you can quote me on that. You really need to be looking at outcome-based training when you look at sports S&C. So if you're a winger, you're probably looking at being a bit more powerful, winning a few more collisions if you're out there and isolated on your own. You might be looking to be a bit more explosive in terms of your acceleration phase of sprinting. Push-pull splits are something that you get from online fitness communities and really that's not appropriate in terms of sports performance. So what should it look like? Well, you should be picking probably 4 exercises that you really need to progress. Let's say in season, winger, 4 exercises in terms of your main exercises in the gym when you're going to be in the gym twice per week. Now, those exercises you should really mull over and think about. You should probably be holding on to those exercises for somewhere between 8 and 16 weeks to ensure you're actually progressing them. But let's say in a standard week of training, you're going to do power cleans, you're going to do bench press, you're going to do high bar back squats, and maybe Bulgarian split squats with a barbell on your back. The 4 of those will make the main pillars of your training. Across 2 sessions, you'll have power cleans and back squats, bench press, and Bulgarian split squats. Now, the rest of those sessions should be made up with well-chosen, once again, but quite voluminous accessory movements. So that should be all your midline and core work you're going to need to do. All the rehab you'll need to do, or prehab on any older injuries that you don't want to get reoccurring, or any injuries you're trying to get rid of right now. That might look like hamstring Nordics. That might look like some direct shoulder work. That might look like some back rehab stuff. Once we filled in those 2 boxes, we have our main performance outcomes that are going to be covered from 4 to 6 exercises over the course of 2 sessions. We've all our prehab and rehab work we need to do to make sure we're staying on the field. The rest of it then should be made up with our accessories and our auxiliaries. This might look like single arm dumbbell row. It might be our quad extension work, whatever it is. Those direct pieces that you know, I need bigger shoulders, I need a stronger back, I need a bigger ass, whatever it is. That's how we look at sports programming for S&C. We never look at it like splits. The split thing is just a kind of mistake. Working and manual labor.
Great question. So just for reference, I've done more manual labor than I really wanted to in my life. So
I hear that.
I grew up on a farm. I used to work at, a lot of people probably don't know this, but I used to work at show jumping, where we used to build horses and put them back up when the horses knocked them. I used to work in garages for my relations for a long time, up until nearly I finished college, and farming. So lots of experience training with manual labor. The first thing here, again, I know I keep saying this in these questions, but managing expectations is a big part of this, and accepting that you're training all day, but your training isn't helping your training that you want to be doing. So that's the first place. You just need to understand that your progress won't be as good if you're working manual labor. I hope the manual labor is paying you really well, and more so than ever, it's a valuable skill, and in the future will be even more valuable skill. So I would say stick with it unless it's ruining your body. Then I would say try get other people to do it, and you tell them what to do, so then they ruin their bodies, but you keep making money. In regards to training, first place is sleep. Get as much sleep as possible. Potentially try nap during the day if you can. Nap in the van or wherever you are, go nap on the site, find somewhere to lie down. You'd be so surprised what 20 minutes of a coffee nap could do for you, 30 minutes if you can afford it. But getting lots of sleep, going to bed early. I used to go to bed at 9:30 for a lot of my other working careers and get up early, but I tried to get as much sleep as possible. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're just going to be steaming yourself into disaster. So get lots of sleep. Second place then is actually nutrition. What you'll find is that people who are working manual labor but are really diligent about their training will come in two camps. One, they'll be mud fat, or they'll be really underfed. I don't know which one you are. If you're mud fat, if you're sloppy, sort it out. The fat tissue is not helping you recover. It's not helping you feel better. It's not helping your health. It's helping your lifts a little bit, but if you're too fat now, try be less fat. It'll affect your training in the short term, but in the long term be more beneficial. Probably you're in an underfed state here, and this is easy to get into. Your NEAT is super high. Your energy available for training later in the day isn't going to be great. So I'd be looking at potentially gaining weight depending on what training you're doing. So if you're any number of manual labor things, you're going to be burning a lot of calories during the day, and your energy for training isn't going to be great. So I'd be looking at nutrient timing as well. So if you decided your body weight is appropriate, timing stuff like carbs before, after, and during training can be really useful. A little bit of protein before training is useful as well. Then I'll be looking at intra-workout stuff. Alex Keekle's actually coming on a podcast. We should be out next week talking about intra-workout nutrition. I'd highly recommend you listen to that. But creatine is going to be a big friend of yours. Probably some kind of carbs. You can probably afford 50 grams of carbs, 75, no problem if you're doing lots of manual labor and you're in the underfed state. So that'll help you a little bit. Try stay away from stims more than you need to. It's hard in the short term, but stims are probably messing you up more than you think you are. I know Zins and caffeine are life, but the unnatural energy they're sustaining, this level of arousal, isn't good for you. You need to enter states where you're very, very relaxed. Your parasympathetic nervous system, where you're just chilling out, really important for recovery, and switching back then to this really heightened state for training. So those 20 milligrams of nicotine a day and that 750 plus milligrams of caffeine from Monsters and coffee is messing up your sleep. It's messing up your ability to go from work to training, to bring a different kind of mindset. So looking at your stim and being a bit more selective with it. Of course, working is hard. That's why people don't want to do it. Stims are going to be somewhat necessary, but if you can get out of that stim cycle, you'd be surprised how much other energy you've available to you. And then I'd be looking at supporting that in different ways rather than direct stims, so other potential supplements there. And a bit of TRT would go a long way here, but that's obviously your own decision.
Thoughts on the enhanced games?
So my first thought on the enhanced games is I'm skeptical if it'll even happen. So I've heard rumours that it's going to be Australia next year, at least that's the thought process. And then I've heard other rumours that the year after it's going to be in the UK. Whether it will actually go ahead is my first thought on this, if it's actually going to happen. I like the idea of it. Like is a very strong word, a very committal word. I'm very interested in the idea of the enhanced games. What the problem is here is, what is it going to manifest as? What is it actually going to be? You know, we've talked for years about PEDs. The only thing we were vehemently against is doping of children and teenagers. Is absolutely disgusting, and it's something we completely are against in all circumstances. However, as adults, we are pretty big fans of you doing what your body what you want. As we talked about earlier in this and multiple times before, elite sports is riddled with PEDs, whatever form they can get it in. There's some kind of illusion that as years goes on, it's not as bad. It's probably worse than ever, or it's as bad as it's ever been. So making this a little bit more open could be better. The interesting thing about some of the drug choice for athletes is a lot of the drug choices now for athletes are to circumnavigate testing, which in effect is actually worse for those athletes' health. And so it could be in some ways healthier for the athletes. Now, do they have some form of a limiter on the athletes and what they're taking, how much they're taking? We don't really know the exact details of what they're going to do there. The other issue is that getting athletes involved to do the enhanced games who are actually of a high caliber will be a bit of a challenge. I know there's some athletes training, like there's the Australian swimmer. I actually know of other athletes who are training in secret, but I can't tell you who they are. I've been sworn to secrecy because there's been alleged massive prizes for that. You'll find out who those athletes are if that doesn't manifest, but I'm very interested in watching those people training. Lastly, the issue here is that we have some outcomes that are going to affect optics. One, it might lessen the impact of the Olympics, because if they get a lot of good caliber athletes training for a lot of money and they don't break world records or they don't exceed past or future Olympics, it's definitely going to put some things in jeopardy. Now, whether that's a good or a bad thing isn't necessarily clear right now. You might say it's good because it exposes the truth and everyone will be like, right, the Olympics is full of gear. But I think most people are kind of on that wavelength now, or more than have been in the past. So whether that's a good or a bad thing, I don't know. Then we'll get the idea that if they do worse than the Olympics, then we've got the issue that they'll say that, oh, they're just bad athletes, and those athletes competing will get a bad rap because it'll be like, oh, they're not breaking world records, they're just crappy athletes and the better athletes are still winning. Or if we get the issue where they exceed world records, then we're in a kind of a weird place where, is that a poor reflection on the athletes who stayed in the Olympics? Is that a weird reflection on these athletes who did pass the world records, because are we viewing them as some kind of juiced up freaks? There's a lot to go on here. It's very interesting. It was kind of inevitable that would happen. Will we go and watch if it's somewhere nearby? Absolutely. But it's a hairy subject and a lot remains to be seen, I think.
I think you've pretty much covered everything on the enhanced games there, but let's just say 5 years down the line, everything goes great. We're ramping up for the second ever enhanced games. One major problem, I think,
cycling up.
I think one major issue is going to be an issue we've seen in other sports. We have tested and non-tested federations, and athletes still competing while doping in the tested federations. We know athletes at an Olympic level dope. Loads of them get popped, loads of them never get popped. We know athletes in tested powerlifting dope, and even though they're in whatever powerlifting federation is massive and worldwide and well tested, we still know there's doped athletes in those. And then it really comes down to this moral thing of like, does the enhanced games actually make any difference? Does it make any difference to bring any sort of change to large scale systematic doping? And to be honest, I don't think it will, because powerlifting is such a great example where we get direct performance outcomes. We see some of the biggest numbers in the world being hit by tested athletes, yet openly doped athletes who are of amazing genetic potential don't hit those same numbers in whatever lift it is, and you can work that out for yourself. Thank you so much for watching. There's a comment thread down below with your ability to pose questions to be in next week's Q&A. So if you have any questions for us, please do let us know. If there's something urgent you want, sikastrength@gmail.com is the best place to contact us. And if you'd like to see any of the training programs we've talked about today, check out the Sika Strength app. It's available on iOS or Android, and you'll be able to do a free trial and take a look at any of those programs.